Hello and welcome to CPT 321 Unit 3. Now this particular week we start working with boxes, loops, and the different types of boxes that we're going to be dealing with is the message box and the input box. What I've done is I've expanded on our sample code and I've included two, basic boxes and a use of a basic loop, which is our do while loop. Now, as I look at this code, you'll notice from last week I have it where you input, please enter a name entry. This portion right here is going to give you feedback. I have it commented out right now because of the fact that I want to circle back around to that. I have a do while loop that int test is less than 10, and then it iterates, it adds one int test, and then it gives a message box giving you the value of int test. Now, I want to be perfectly sure and make sense of this. You'll notice that Visual Basic, when you declare a variable that you don't initialize anywhere, or excuse me, when you use a variable you don't initialize anywhere, it automatically declares that for you, and it puts a default value in there. However, that is sloppy coding as you go to other programming languages, and you always want to make sure to do something like this. Dim int test, right? Int test as integer. So I'm initializing it, and I'm going to make it to be 0 to start with. So I did, excuse me. And so I'm going to, sorry, different language in my head. So I can do int test equals 0. So what I'm doing is I'm initializing it to be 0 to start with. There is a way to smash it on the same, to declare it and give it a value in the same one, but we're going to divide those up just for simplicity's sake. So this defines, this declares the actual variable, and this actually initializes it to be 0, though it wasn't necessarily required here, but it's a good habit to get into, especially when dealing with other languages. Now, I'm going to go ahead and run this so you can kind of see what it looks like. So I'm running. All right, please enter a name. We're going to enter in Bob, right? So this is my input box. If I look at my code, I'm going to bring that up in the background. So I'm right here. str sample equals input box. Please enter a name. That's the prompt, and it's name entry. So name entry is the actual name of the box. This is the actual prompt. Going back to my code, this is the actual prompt right here, and what the name of the box is. What it's going to do after it inputs that information, it puts it in str sample. Got it. Then we're going to drop into this do while loop right here. That's going to do while int test is less than 10, adding 1 to int test. Now, in this particular case, I could have put a for next loop in here. It probably would have been better since as an example, but I also wanted to show you what happens when you if you're using a do while loop that's going to loop until a certain exit condition is met. You have to make sure that you iterate those values or touch base with your exit condition inside the loop, because if you don't, you're going to get an infinite loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it like it is now, and then I'm going to purposely make an infinite loop after the fact. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to put in Bob. So the first iteration of my loop, it's 1. So as it's going through, what it's saying is, okay, where int test starts at a 0, it's less than 10. Awesome. I'm going to add 1 to int test and store it back to int test. So it's going to basically be 0 plus 1. Message box iteration of this loop is int test. Now, I've declared the type, or I've made it with this particular parameter, I've made the type of message box called VBOK only. There is part of your discussion post where it asks some specifics about the message boxes, and when I modify this line of code right here, I'll get into those specifics. You'll note right here, this is the loop count check, which is the title of that particular message box. If I go back here, loop count check, since it's a VBOK only, I push OK. The iteration of the loop is 1. Iteration of the loop is 2. So it's going through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then it stops, because at the point in time where the loop becomes 11, or int test becomes 11, the exit condition of the loop is met, because as long as int test is less than 10, it continues. So as soon as it becomes, as soon as it becomes 10, it backs out. If I put less than or equal to 11 right there, okay, when I actually run it, so I'm going to run it again so you get a feel for what that does. It'll actually loop one last time because, please enter name, Bob, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and it's going to iterate one last time, go to 11 and then stop because it's less than or equal to, and it's a line by line fashion. So it actually, int test is 10, it continues through the loop, adds 1 to it, and then gives you feedback that says the iteration of the loop is 11, and then it should stop. Now let's say, for instance, I'm going in here and I put int test and I comment out int test. Now, what'll happen is it'll go into that loop, and that loop will become what's called an endless loop. So that'll mean that you'll never actually make the exit condition because int test is always less than or equal to 10. And when I run this, since I'm not adding anything to it, I put in Bob, right? Bob, okay, loop 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and I'm just pushing, because it never actually adds anything to int test, okay? So in this particular case, you've actually entered into an endless loop, and that's bad. Oh, yeah. All right, so I have to go back over here, and I should be able to push stop. Okay, fine. I've locked myself in. Let's do a, oh boy, I think there's a control. Well, interesting lesson learned. My keyboard apparently does not have a break button on it. So if you do not have a control break, there's some keyboard shortcuts that you can use to actually break it out. I ended up Control-Alt deleting and stopping the process. That was interesting. I haven't ran into that before. So by all means, before you start messing around with it, make sure that you have the ability to break out a code if it does get into the endless loop. I didn't save it, so no big deal. But in my particular case, the next stage that I was going to get to is that for our message box, you'll notice that button as VB box message style VB OK, right? That's the one I'm used to. But you'll note that in here, this box, there are tons of different boxes. Each one of these boxes give you feedback. For instance, yes, no, cancel will return a value that's stored in this feedback string that I have here as a yes, which is a 0, a no, excuse me, a yes, which I believe is a 1, a no, which is a 0, or a cancel, which is a -1. Each one of these values returns something different. Or excuse me, each one of these message boxes returns something different. So keep an eye out for what you're looking at. For instance, I'm going to choose VB OK cancel, and that's going to be mine, and I'm simply going to stop it. So now what happens when I run this, the way it should work, is it said, please enter a name, czar, and it'll come back, here is your input value, czar, and I have OK and cancel. Remember, before I just had OK. Now, if I was going to push cancel, my input would be returned, I believe, as a -1, and then I could evaluate my -1 to do something with it. Yes, no, cancel will do a different way, each one of these. So take a look at the different possible message box styles and see which one actually works out best for you. Otherwise, this concludes my micro lesson for Unit 3. It was a very interesting one. Make sure you have a break button on your keyboard, I guess, so you can do control break in case you get into a spiral of your code. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to seeing your products.